Someone in your life is smiling at you with their mouth and calculating your downfall with their mind. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to spot them. This isn't about paranoia. It's about pattern recognition. Jealousy is one of the oldest survival mechanisms in the human brain, older than language, older than agriculture, wired into the same neural circuitry that once decided who ate and who starved in a tribe of 30 people. When someone becomes jealous of you, their brain doesn't experience it as an abstract emotion. It experiences it as a threat to their own survival ranking. And threatened animals, even ones wearing a friendly face, behave in predictable ways. Today we're breaking down 7 of those behavioral signatures, each one rooted in real psychological research, each one a doorway into understanding not just other people, but the machinery of status, comparison, and ego that runs underneath almost every human relationship. Before we get into the signs themselves, it's worth knowing where to even look, because most people scan the wrong crowd entirely. Aristotle addressed this directly in his work on rhetoric more than 2,000 years ago, and his observation still holds up better than most modern psychology. He argued that envy is never felt toward people who are wildly different from us. A janitor does not envy a king. The distance is too large to register as a comparison at all. Envy, Aristotle wrote, is reserved for people close to us in age, background, profession, or social circle, because those are the only comparisons the brain treats as relevant. This is why the coldest reaction to your success rarely comes from a stranger. It comes from the friend who started their business the same year you started yours, the sibling closest to you in age, the classmate who was ranked just above or just below you. Proximity is the fuel. Keep that in mind as we go through each sign, because the closer someone stands to you in life, the more precisely these behaviors tend to show up. The first sign is the compliment that leaves a bruise. Psychologists call this evaluative ambivalence. Praise and criticism fused into a single sentence so the criticism can hide inside the praise like a splinter wrapped in silk. You got the promotion? Wow, they must be really desperate this year. That dress looks great on you. I could never pull that off, but good for you. Notice the architecture. The compliment is real, but it's never allowed to stand alone. It always needs a counterweight, because a jealous mind cannot tolerate handing you an unqualified win. Researchers at Princeton studying what's called the stereotype content model, found that people rate high-achieving individuals as more competent but less warm, and jealous people resolve that discomfort by attacking the warmth half of the equation. They can't deny your success, so they quietly reframe it as luck, privilege, or an accident, because if your success was earned, it says something uncomfortable about their own effort. Here's what most people miss about this sign. The backhanded compliment isn't cruelty for its own sake. It's a coping mechanism for something called social comparison theory, first proposed by psychologist Leon Festinger in 1954. Festinger argued that human beings don't evaluate themselves in a vacuum. We measure our worth entirely in relation to others nearby. A jealous person isn't reacting to your achievement in isolation. They're reacting to what your achievement implies about the gap between where they are and where they think they should be. The compliment-insult combo is their way of shrinking that gap without doing the work required to actually close it. There's a name for this on a cultural scale, not just an individual one. In Australia and New Zealand, sociologists have documented what's called tall poppy syndrome a term describing the tendency of a community to cut down anyone who visibly grows taller than the rest of the field. Studies on the phenomenon, including work published in the Australian Journal of Psychology, found that high achievers in these cultures often deliberately downplay their own success in public specifically to avoid becoming a target for this kind of leveling behavior. That's worth sitting with for a second. The fear of triggering someone else's jealousy is powerful enough to make successful people shrink themselves preemptively. If you've ever caught yourself minimizing a win before someone else even reacted to it, quietly bracing for the backhanded comment before it arrives, that instinct wasn't you. Irrational. It was pattern recognition trained by prior experience with exactly this sign. The second sign is subtler, and almost nobody catches it in real time. They start copying you. not admiring you, copying you. The same haircut appears a few weeks after yours. The same vocabulary, the same brand of shoes, the same hobby they mocked you for a year ago suddenly becomes something I should who always wanted to try. French historian and philosopher René Girard built an entire theory of human behavior around this pattern, calling it mimetic desire. The idea that humans don't generate their wants independently is they borrow them from people they secretly view as rivals. Girard's insight was radical. We don't want objects. We want what another person's desire for that object seems to prove about them. A jealous person copying you isn't flattery. It's an attempt to close the distance between your identity and theirs, because on some unconscious level, they believe that if they can look like you, they can steal the thing that makes people respond to you the way they do. This is different from genuine inspiration, and the difference lies in the emotional residue that follows. When someone is truly inspired by you, the energy between you stays warm. They'll often tell you outright, "I saw how you did that, and I wanted to try it too." A mimetic rival does the opposite. They copy silently, then act mildly irritated when you notice the resemblance. Because being caught in the act of imitation exposes the very insecurity the imitation was designed to hide. You can watch this exact mechanism play out at an institutional scale, not just a personal one. Business historians studying competitive rivalries have repeatedly noted how quickly a market leader's most distinctive feature gets absorbed by a trailing competitor, almost feature for feature, right down to the interface choices and marketing language, within months of it proving successful. Girard would say, this isn't coincidence or even strategy in the purest sense. It's mimetic rivalry playing out through corporate structures instead of individual people. Entire teams organizing themselves around the desire to become the thing they admire, competing against rather than inventing something genuinely their own. The same current runs through friendships, families, and workplaces at a smaller scale. Watch for it not in the copying itself, but in the refusal to credit the source. A person operating from admiration says, "I got this from you." A person operating from mimetic rivalry lets you find out on your own, and then acts surprised that you noticed. The third sign shows up specifically in group settings because jealousy needs an audience to do its real damage. Watch what happens when you share good news in front of other people. A person who is genuinely happy for you will ask follow-up questions, pull details out of you, let the moment breathe. A jealous person does something psychologists call conversational narcissism, minimization, They let your news land for about 3 seconds, then pivot the groups. Says attention either to themselves or to a problem buried inside your good news. That's great you got into that program. Must be expensive though. You ran a marathon? My cousin ran one in under 3 hours. It's honestly not that rare anymore. The goal isn't to insult you directly. It's to prevent your win from fully registering in the social hierarchy of the room. Because status, to the jealous mind, is a zero-sum resource. If your stock goes up in front of witnesses, theirs feels like it drops, even though, mathematically, that's not how admiration actually works. Admiration is not a pie, but try explaining that to a nervous system running on scarcity logic inherited from small, tribal groups where reputation genuinely did determine who got fed. Organizational psychologist Michelle Duffy has spent years researching exactly this pattern inside workplaces. Under the term social undermining behavior intended to hinder a person's ability to establish and maintain positive relationships and success at work, while stopping just short of anything that could be labeled outright hostility. Duffy's research found that employees who felt envious of a high-performing coworker were significantly more likely to engage in these subtle undermining behaviors, and crucially, the undermining increased specifically when the high performer was seen by management as a rising star. The jealousy wasn't triggered by the coworker's competence alone. It was triggered by the coworker's competence becoming visible and rewarded in front of others. This is the detail most people miss. It's rarely your skill that provokes envy. It's your skill being publicly recognized. Now here's where the science gets genuinely strange. And this is the fourth sign. The one with a physiological signature you can almost predict in a lab. In 2009, neuroscientists Hidehiko Takahashi and colleagues published a study in the journal Science that mapped what happens inside the brain of an envious person watching someone else succeed and then watching that same successful person fail. When the rival in the experiment succeeded, the jealous subjects showed heightened activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, ASCs, a region associated with physical and social pain, meaning envy is processed by the brain in some of the same circuitry as a broken bone. But when that same rival later suffered a misfortune, the subject's brains lit up in the ventral striatum, the reward center, the same region that activates from food, money, and sex. This is the neurological definition of Schadenfreude, and it explains the fourth sign perfectly. A jealous person will go quiet, distant, or strangely cold right after your success, and then become suspiciously warm and attentive the moment something goes wrong for you. Watch the timing. Genuine friends show up steadily. Jealous people show up selectively, proportional to your suffering, not your need. Language itself has quietly acknowledged this emotion for centuries. Long before neuroscience could prove it existed in the brain, German gave us the compound word for it directly, joining Schadenfreude, literally, damaged joy, into everyday vocabulary, because the feeling was common enough to need its own name. And the oldest recorded account of this exact escalation, envy curdling first into cold withdrawal and finally into destruction, appears in the very first family described in the book of Genesis, where Cain's resentment toward his brother's favored offering builds not from hatred but from unfavorable comparison. A story so old it predates the philosophical vocabulary to describe what it was depicting. The pattern hasn't changed in thousands of years. Only the stakes have gotten smaller and the frequency has gotten higher, because now the comparison isn't limited to your one brother. It's every peer, every colleague, every person your age, visible on a screen at any given moment. Before moving to the fifth sign, it's worth addressing a question that's probably surfaced by now. Does everyone who feels envy eventually behave like this? No. And the distinction matters more than almost anything else in this video. Dutch researcher Niels van der Ven ran a series of studies distinguishing between what he termed *benign envy and *malicious envy, and found they are, functionally, two separate emotions that simply share a common trigger. Benign envy shows up as motivation. I want what they have, so let me work toward it, and correlates with increased effort, admiration, and even improved performance in the envious person. Malicious envy shows up as the 7 signs in this video. The desire not to rise to someone's level, but to pull them back down to yours. Van der Ven's research found the deciding factor is usually whether the envious person believes the other person's success was deserved. When it's seen as earned through fair effort, envy tends to stay benign. When it's perceived, rightly or wrongly, as unfair, undeserved, or a matter of pure luck, it curdles into the malicious form almost every time. This is why some people cheer you on, while others quietly work against you for the exact same achievement. The difference was never really about you. It was about whether they could privately justify your win as fair. The 5th sign moves outside the direct relationship entirely, into the realm of reputation. This is the most dangerous of the 7, because it operates when you're not even in the room. Evolutionary psychologists studying indirect aggression, researchers like Anne Campbell and Tracy Vaillancourt, have documented that when direct confrontation carries social risk, jealousy expresses itself through reputational sabotage, subtle gossip, selectively shared stories, concerned comments to mutual friends that plant a seed of doubt without ever sounding like an attack. I just think people should know the full story before they trust him with that. I'm not saying anything bad. I just noticed she's been kind of different lately. Vaillancourt's research found this behavior spikes specifically toward people perceived as attractive, competent, or upwardly mobile, competitors, essentially, and that it functions as a low-risk, high-reward strategy. It damages a rival's standing while letting the aggressor maintain deniability and a reputation for being reasonable. If you've ever found out that someone was quietly reframing your character to a group you weren't part of, you weren't imagining it. You were watching an ancient status management strategy play out through a group chat, instead of a village campfire. There's a simple test that separates genuine concern from jealousy dressed up as concern, and it has nothing to do with the words being used. Both versions can sound almost identical on the surface. The test is whether the information was ever brought to you first. Real concern goes directly to the source. Hey, I noticed this. Can we talk about it? Reputational sabotage skips you entirely and goes straight to your audience because its actual purpose was never to help you improve. It was to shape how other people see you before you get the chance to shape it yourself. If you find out secondhand that someone has concerns they never once raised with you directly, you're not looking at feedback. You're looking at a narrative being built in a room you weren't invited into. The sixth sign lives inside scrutiny. The way a jealous person seems to develop a specialist's knowledge of your flaws. They remember the exact date you made a mistake 3 years ago. They bring up your failures with a precision that has nothing to do with the conversation at hand. This connects to a defense mechanism Sigmund Freud first articulated and modern psychology has since refined, projection, but paired with something more specific called downward comparison maintenance. A jealous person needs your flaws cataloged and ready for retrieval, because your flaws are the only currency that keeps the comparison bearable. If they can't out-earn you, outbuild you, or out-create you, they can at least out-know your weaknesses, and that knowledge becomes a private insurance policy against the discomfort of your success. This is why jealous people are often, paradoxically, your most attentive observers. They're not watching you because they admire you. They're watching you because they're building a case file. Psychologist Sylvan Tompkins, whose work on affect theory later shaped much of modern shame research, proposed something important here. Envy and shame are almost always intertwined, because comparing yourself unfavorably to someone else doesn't just produce longing for what they have. It produces shame about not having it already. A person who feels that shame has two options: sit with the discomfort and use it as motivation, or export the shame outward by finding something wrong with you, so the discomfort has somewhere else to live besides their own self-image. The cataloging of your flaws isn't really about your flaws at all. It's a shame relief valve, and it explains why this sign often comes from the people who seem, on paper, to have plenty of reasons to feel secure. Security and jealousy aren't opposites. They're often unrelated entirely, because jealousy isn't a measurement of what someone has. It's a measurement of what they believe they were supposed to have by now, compared to you. The seventh sign is the hardest to detect because it's designed to be undetectable, and it lives in the half-second gap between a public reaction and a private one. Psychologist Paul Ekman, who spent decades studying involuntary facial expressions, identified what he called micro-expressions, flashes of true emotion lasting less than half a second that leak out before a person's conscious mind can suppress them into a socially acceptable mask. Ekman found that contempt, unlike other emotions, has a uniquely asymmetric signature. One corner of the mouth tightens and rises, just slightly, on only one side of the face. It's nearly invisible in real time, but it's there in the split second before someone says, "Congratulations." A genuinely happy reaction is symmetrical and arrives instantly. A masked, jealous reaction has a barely perceptible delay, a computational lag while the brain overrides the true response with the socially required one, followed by an expression that looks correct but feels, to anyone paying close attention, slightly late to the party. You felt this before even if you couldn't name it. Someone said all the right words, and something in you still felt colder afterward instead of warmer. Trust that instinct. Ekman's research suggests your unconscious pattern recognition is often faster and more accurate than your conscious reasoning when it comes to reading sincerity. The leak isn't limited to the face either. Psychologist Klaus Scherer, who spent much of his career studying vocal emotion, found that pitch and pacing carry emotional information that's, say, even harder to consciously fake than facial muscles, because most people have never practiced controlling their voice the way they're due. that something practiced controlling their expressions. A congratulations delivered in a genuinely happy register tends to rise in pitch and quicken slightly, mirroring excitement. A masked, jealous congratulations often flattens, pitch compressed, pacing just a touch too even, too controlled, like someone reading a line rather than feeling one. You won't consciously catalog any of this in the moment, but your nervous system will, and it will file the interaction under something felt off, even when you can't point to a single specific thing that was said wrong. So what do you do with all of this? Not weaponize it. Not turn every relationship into a forensic investigation. The purpose of recognizing these 7 signs isn't to make you suspicious of everyone who ever hesitates before congratulating you. Normal humans have off days, bad moods, and complicated emotions that have nothing to do with envy. The purpose is to stop absorbing behavior that was never about you in the first place. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, never intended for publication, that the people who wrong us do so out of their own confusion about what is actually good. And that understanding, this doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does dissolve the sting of taking it personally. A jealous person's coldness toward your success is not a verdict on your worth. It's a mirror held up to their own unresolved relationship with themselves. You didn't create that discomfort by succeeding. It was already there, waiting for a trigger, and you simply happened to be visible when it activated. It's worth remembering that Marcus Aurelius wasn't writing from a position of comfort when he arrived at that conclusion. He was the most powerful man in the known world, surrounded daily by advisors and generals who had every incentive to resent his position, flatter his ego, or quietly undermine him for their own advancement. His journal, later published as Meditations, wasn't philosophy for its own sake. It was a survival manual for staying psychologically intact while living inside a constant current of other people's envy. If a Roman emperor needed that discipline to function, the rest of us shouldn't feel strange for needing it too. The skill isn't becoming immune to how others feel about your success. It's declining the invitation to make their feelings your responsibility. There's a strange kind of freedom in that reframe. Once you understand jealousy as a nervous system responding to perceived scarcity rather than a rational judgment of your character, you stop needing the jealous person's approval to validate your win. Their silence stops being evidence against you. Their backhanded compliment stops landing as a wound and starts registering as data, information about where they are, not information about where you stand. And the people who show up warm, curious, and steady after your success, without a 3-second delay, without an asymmetrical smile, without a sudden need to mention your flaws, those are the ones worth building a life alongside, because their nervous system isn't running a scarcity script. It's running on something rarer, the genuine, uncomplicated belief that your win doesn't cost them anything at all. 3 practical shifts follow naturally from everything above, and none of them involve confrontation. First, stop narrating your wins in real time to your entire circle, and start noticing who you so instinctively want to tell first. That instinct is usually more accurate than any conscious audit of who your real friends are. Second, when you clock one of these 7 signs, resist the urge to test the person or seek reassurance from them. Testing a jealous dynamic rarely resolves it. It just gives the other person more material to work with. Third, and this is the one almost nobody wants to hear, periodically check whether you're running any of these 7 patterns towards someone else. Envy is not a character flaw reserved for other people. It's a universal nervous system response. And the same brain circuitry Takahashi mapped in his lab exists in you too. The goal was never to become someone incapable of feeling envy. It's to notice it fast enough that it informs your own ambition, instead of quietly reshaping how you treat the people around you. If this gave you language for something you felt but couldn't explain, that's exactly what this channel is built for. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this one. Hit like, so this reaches the people who need to hear it. And share it with the one person who's been quietly wondering if they were imagining all of this. They weren't.